We've got some interesting stories we're covering today with really fantastic guests. Thank you all for being with me on this Substack Live. I'm really enjoying this platform because I love how smart and engaged you all are and interested in some of the stories that I think are really important to cover. Before we have our first guests on, though, I'm just going to give you guys a quick rundown of some of the stories that we're paying attention to this week at Katie Couric Media. So, we're learning a lot more about that horrific shooting that took place in Manhattan inside an office building in Midtown. So, a gunman carrying an assault rifle. It was so eerie to see him walking across that plaza with a rifle over his shoulder. He killed four people. He critically wounded a fifth before shooting himself. I know that officials have said a motive hasn't been determined, but as you probably know, he left a three-page note in his pocket and said that he was a former high school football player. And in the note, he urged authorities to do a brain scan on him for CTE, which is a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma that can only be diagnosed after death. Four different shootings occurred on Monday across the US in Atlanta, New York, Reno, and Detroit. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been more than 250 mass shootings in 2025 so far. Hopefully, this will reignite yet another conversation about these assault weapons, weapons of war that really serve no purpose for hunters, even sports shooters. So perhaps this will make people talk about that again. I wanted to also tell you what's happening in Texas, where they're in the midst of a special legislative session. I was trying to talk to James Tallarico, representative in Texas. We had a lot of technical difficulties. We're going to try to talk to him again in the near future. But I wanted to tell you about one of the items on the agenda. It is redrawing the state's congressional maps. Now, typically, this is done every decade to account for changes in the census. And despite Greg Abbott's initial reticence, Donald Trump has been very vocal about wanting to pick up Texas seats in the 2026 midterms because, like most sitting presidents, I'm sure he's very nervous about what's going to happen in the midterms. This afternoon, the GOP led state legislature unveiled a redrawn congressional map that would provide Republicans with five new red leaning districts and pack Democratic voters more tightly into urban districts. Now, this, as I mentioned, was in advance of the midterms when sitting presidents generally take a shellacking, which I think George Bush referred it as once. Now, this could end up backfiring on Republicans by spreading their voters too thin. So, we're going to continue to keep an eye on this super important story. And last but not least, you all probably heard or read about this that and I think it's so interesting that French President Macron and his wife Brigitte, how's my French accent? They're suing Candace Owen, the right wing influencer and YouTuber, in a 22 count defamation lawsuit. The lawsuit claims that Owens has endorsed, manufactured, and promoted a series of false statements about the French president and the first lady, his wife, including that Brigitte Macron was born a man and transitioned, and that the couple abused their power to conceal their past. It's nonsense, but it's also very sad to me. Another example of how trans people are being marginalized and criticized and erased. Candace Owens, meanwhile, responded by doubling down on her claim. She called Brigitte Macron a groomer and pedophile on her YouTube channel, said the lawsuit was an obvious and desperate public relations strategy. Ay, ay, ay.